Seaman Third Class Petty Officer James Thomas Botkin, United States Navy, World War II. Jim's one of my Pacific War veterans. He enlisted in the Navy 6 days after Pearl Harbor, like a lot of young men did. It was December 13th, 1941. Served 5 years in the military, was involved in night battles off of Guadalcanal in November of 1942 aboard the U.S.S. Sterett, which was a destroyer, which was responsible for many sunken Japanese ships. He also was involved in August of 43 at Vela Gulf, the battles there. So saw a lot of combat, and he was one of the most memorable things he told me was how they buried sailors at sea. It's a very touching story. You don't hear much about burials at sea, but they did them. They had to do them. And but that's in this story here. I interviewed Jim in Dinuba, California. It was April 21st, 2010. We lost him a couple of years later at the age of 90, so Jim's no longer with us, but his story's living on through this YouTube channel. I'm really grateful for that. Jim also served as the commander of the American Legion in his local hometown area in Dinuba, California. And I want to thank Rita Schultz. Rita came forward and wanted to sponsor another story. I've worked with her once before. Rita, thank you. I look in this camera and thank you and your family for honoring Jim today with this story. I know you were from that area and you wanted to sponsor a story from the area there in California. So I'm glad I was able to pick Jim's story. It's one of the best, and you really will enjoy it. So Rita, thank you for honoring our veterans and in our country and for supporting my work. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. God bless you. Folks, if you like to do like Rita did and want to sponsor, donate to this work, I would encourage that. Keep this thing going, folks. Let's keep this thing going. You see the end result of all this work, and there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into putting these videos out and all the traveling that was done to interview all these veterans. So if you'd like to become a part of this work, I would encourage you to do it. If you'd like to honor someone in your family with a story, feel free to do that also. Some of you are doing that. So if you have a loved one in your family that has served and you want to honor them, just go ahead and sponsor a story, and I will honor them at the beginning like I'm doing now, and show a picture of them if you have one, and just talk a little bit about their service. So if that's interesting to you, I would encourage you to do that. So, okay, folks, Voices of History Radio. I didn't talk about it in my last broadcast. I forgot. It's going 24 hours a day. You can download an app for free. It's called Voices of History Radio. It's in the app stores. It's a free download. You can listen to all the stories that are on this YouTube channel on the audio. There's times you just can't sit down and watch a video. Well, that's where the radio station comes in to play. And I'm really wanting to get it into the hands of our young generation, our kids, our students, because they need to have living history in the palm of their hands. If I was a school teacher, I would give homework assignments. Go watch one of these videos and do a homework assignment. You can't learn any better than that. History is best learned from those who were there, folks. The teachers tell me that, so I would invite you to do that. So it's broadcasting 24 hours a day, and I just love my radio station. I listen to it every day. I really do. Folks, thank you for watching and sharing these stories, and I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Let's keep this thing going. We're fighting for the same freedoms today in our own country that our veterans fought for on foreign soil. So with that being said, let's honor Jim and his service in World War II, and I'll see you on my next broadcast. God bless you. Did you ever think you'd be 87?
No.
What year did you go in the military?
I went in 6 days after Pearl Harbor, 13th of December, 41.
Tell me about Pearl Harbor. Where were you when you heard the news?
I was working that day. I worked in an orange packing house in Exeter. It's a town about 35 miles from here. And it was Sunday, but oranges, you can't pick when they're wet, and that was a dry day, and so you could pick, so the pickers were in the field, and I was in the packing house receiving the fruit that was coming in. And I heard the news at noon on that day while we had lunch.
Is that the reason you joined the military?
Yes. I I went to work the next day also, but that night when I got home, I saw the pictures in the newspapers of what had happened at Pearl Harbor. And so on Tuesday, I went to Los Angeles. The Navy had a recruiting station in Chavez Ravine, which is now where Dodger Stadium is. And I talked to the recruiting people there, and they offered me a real good deal in the Navy Reserve as a yeoman, because at that time I could still type 50 words a minute from high school. And but stupid, I wasn't wanting to join to pound a typewriter somewhere. So I came back home, and a couple of days later I enlisted in the regular Navy for 6 years as an apprentice seaman at $21 a month. So it took me 2 years to get back up to the level I could have started at.
So your basic training was in San Diego?
San Diego, and very short. We didn't even have our shots when they kicked us out of the boot camp, and fortunately 3 of us were able to go on to training schools. I went on to fire control school, and after I finished that and made third class petty officer, I was assigned to destroyers Atlantic, and I was sent to Norfolk, Virginia, and assigned to the U.S.S. Sterett DD 407. And while there, she was in the North Atlantic on what they called the Neutrality Patrol at that time. And I was supposed to meet her, but they changed her destination point to New York, and so I was transferred to New York. And while I was waiting there, I did guard duty on the pier where the Normandy was, where she had burned. And also I did duty on shore patrol. And the ships was changed again, and she pulled into Portland, Maine. And so they took me off of her and put me on shore duty in New York City. And again, stupid, I said, that isn't why I joined the Navy. So I was reassigned to the Sterett, but by that time she had come around and was on the Pacific side. So I was on a train, came back to San Diego, and I missed her by a few days. And then I got on a Dutch tramp, an old steamer loaded with troops. Everything on it was temporary. Took us, I think, 7 days to make it to Pearl Harbor. And there I went aboard a troop transport and went to Espiritu Santos in the New Hebrides. And there's where I caught the Sterett and began my service on her. And I was aboard her until November 30th of 1943. I was aboard her almost 18 months.
Now, you weren't out to sea that whole time, were you?
No, well, we were out there until we got shot up and had to come back to the States for repairs. Other than that, yes, we were out. That's all we did.
You got shot up. Tell me what happened. Where were you at? What was happening?
That's kind of a long story.
Well, just Japanese, I mean.
Well, yes, but actually it started one day, and it wasn't. You couldn't say it was over until after the next day, because we met with other ships off of Guadalcanal real early in the morning of Thursday, the 12th of November, 42. There was one group that came from Espiritu Santos, and there was one group that came from Noumea in New Caledonia. And when the two groups merged, the resulting group was 4 transports loaded with Marines and supplies for Guadalcanal, 12 destroyers, 2 heavy cruisers, 1 light cruiser, and 2 anti-aircraft cruisers. And this was all under the command of Admiral Daniel Callahan, and he was aboard the cruiser San Francisco. And we took the transports in at dawn, and they began offloading personnel and supplies. And we formed a picket line to protect them. And about mid-morning, we were alerted to an oncoming air group. And the transports got underway, and we formed a defensive line around them. And it turned out to be 22 Japanese torpedo bombers. They rendezvoused over Tulagi, and then they sat down close to the water and attacked. My ship happened to be in the point of the screen, and we opened fire with the 5-inch, and we shot down 2 of the airplanes. And then as they got closer, we shot down 2 more with our 20 millimeters, and we were credited with a probable on 1 more. And all of the planes, the attacking planes, were shot down, and none of their torpedoes scored a hit on any of our ships. We had 1 destroyer, the Buchanan, that was hit by friendly fire, a 5-inch hitter stack, and killed 5 of her crew members. And 1 of the attacking planes crashed in the after section of the San Francisco, and it destroyed her secondary con and her after fire control tower and killed 30 of her crew members. But with that, the transports returned to their anchorages and they resumed offloading. And then mid-afternoon, we again got word of a approaching attack group of aircraft. This group consisted primarily of 2 motored bombers that were codenamed Betty, very similar to our own B-25s. Yeah. And they had an escort of 0 fighters. And this time, my aircraft took off from Henderson Field on Guadalcanal and met them and did what they could. And then as they got closer, then we opened up with our guns. And so that day, we were attacked by 52 enemy aircraft, of which we confirmed that we shot down 32. And none of our ships were hit by any of them. And we finished offloading at dark, and we got the transports underway again, and we screened them in the direction of Espiritu Santos. And at 2200 hours, the 4 transports with 4 destroyers were released to find their way back, and the remaining ships, the 8 destroyers and 5 cruisers, turned around and headed back for Guadalcanal. And Admiral Callahan formed our group into a single file with 4 destroyers leading, followed by the AA cruiser Atlanta, and then the heavy cruiser San Francisco, and the heavy cruiser Portland, the light cruiser Helena, and the AA cruiser Juno, followed by 4 more of the destroyers. My ship was the 3rd ship in line that night, and we actually made contact with them, radar contact, at about 20,000 yards. Mm-hmm. But for whatever his reason, the Admiral did not have us commence firing, which we could have. We actually intermingled with their approaching ships before we ever got the word to fire. They approached in 2 columns, single file. We went between the columns in an opposite direction. And our biggest problem there, of course we didn't know it at the time, was that we were badly outgunned because they had in their group 2 battleships, where our biggest ships were heavy cruisers. Mm-hmm. So we were looking at 14-inch guns, and our biggest guns were the 8-inch guns on the 2 heavy cruisers. But when we actually were intermingled, we able to pick up an enemy target, and we laid our guns on it, and the torpedo tubes, waiting for the word to commence firing. But the first word we got was a firing order, and it was even numbered ships to port and odd numbered ships to starboard. And of course we were odd numbered and we were aimed in the wrong direction, so we had to abandon that target and turn around and pick up a target off the starboard beam, which we did, which was a cruiser. And when the order came to commence firing, we started firing with our 5-inch, and we launched a torpedo. And fire from our 5-inch hit the pilot house of the cruiser, and evidently the torpedo hit her also, because she wound up sitting dead in the water, and ships coming behind us finished it off. And at that time, we became the target for one of the Japanese battleships. And the first salvo from their 14-inch guns, one of the shells hit our mast. And that put our search radar and our TBS radio system, which is the system that we use between ships when close range. It's kind of like the CBs that truck drivers use today. It put that out of commission. We were at about 6,000 yards range at that point, and we opened fire with our 5-inch, scored many hits and set fires in her superstructure, and we closed to 4,000 yards. And there we launched 4 torpedoes, 2 of which were definite hits and 1 possible. The ship was so badly slowed that she was still in the area the following morning, and aircraft from Henderson Field and from the carrier Enterprise finished her off and sank her. And as we cleared the battleship, a Japanese destroyer came across our bow. We immediately opened fire with our 5-inch and launched 2 torpedoes, and that ship blew up and sank without ever firing a single shot in our direction. But at that time, we were about the only American ship still left in the area that was active, and we became the target for the remaining enemy ships. And we took 11 hits. Our gun 3, gun 4, upper handling room 3 and 4 were destroyed, set on fire. The torpedo tubes on the starboard side, a shell hit that. 1 shell hit the midship deck house. Of our 190-man crew, we had 28 were killed, 4 were blown over the side, and 31 were badly wounded. So we lost the effects of approximately a third of our crew. At that point, we only had 2 guns left, plus 1 torpedo. And our captain opted to leave the area, which we did at flank speed, which got us away in a hurry. But at that speed, we created such a high wind that it made very difficult for the damage control people to fight the fires. But not too far in that run, we lost number 1 and number 2 boilers, and our speed then was, all we could do was a little over 24 knots. But that got us away and allowed the firefighters to get the fires under control. And at that time, we had without the TBS to contact other of our ships, and without our search radar, we didn't know if we were the only ship there or what was going on. And so we headed in the general direction of Espiritu Santos, which was the forward base at that time. And at dawn, we found that there were other ships that had survived. The cruiser San Francisco, she was badly hit. And she took her hit early on, and it hit in the pilot house, the first ones, and killed the task force commander, Admiral Callahan, and also the commanding officer of the ship. And with her secondary con out, there was nobody ready to operate the ship, and she wound up sitting dead in the water. It turned out that two young junior officers got their heads together and were able to get her operating again, and she was able to leave the scene. And the cruiser Portland was damaged in the screws and the rudder, and she could still move, but she couldn't steer. All she could do was go in a circle. She was not sunk, and eventually she was towed to Australia and repaired. And the light cruiser Helena had very minor damage. The lead cruiser was the Atlanta, which was one of the late model AA cruisers, was sunk. Admiral Scott went down with that ship. And the last cruiser, the Juno, was badly damaged. And then of the destroyers, my ship was badly damaged. The 445, the Fletcher, the flagship of the Fletcher class, had no damage. She was the last ship in line. The ship that followed us was the O'Banion. She was DD 450. She was slightly damaged. And so the two lead ships in the line, the first one was a Cushing, and when she made contact with the enemy force, she turned crossways to our approaching line so she could bring her guns all to bear on the target. And that wound up with a block, and the ship behind her was the Laffey. And the Laffey had to make a real hard veer off to keep from ramming over the blocking that the Cushing was set up. So that disrupted our whole attack force. And we went ahead and did what we could do, mostly on our own then. There was total confusion on our part and on their part. And the theory in the attack that we did was that by splitting their columns, that the enemy ships firing at us that missed us might hit one of their own ships. And the destroyers that brought up the rear of it, the Aaron Ward, was badly damaged and was unable to leave the scene, but she did not go down. The Barton was right behind her. She took 3 hits from the battleship and went down. The Munson was behind that. She was also hit badly and went down, but not until almost noon the next day. And the last ship in line was the Fletcher, and she had no damage. But when we got daylight and could see what was going on, why, the senior officer present at that time was a commanding officer of the light cruiser Helena, and he took charge of the surviving forces. And he lined up the 3 surviving cruisers, with the Helena leading the way, the San Francisco following, and the Juno following that. And then the 3 destroyers that were there, the Fletcher was out in front, and my ship, the Sterett, was on the starboard beam of the screen, and the O'Bannon was on the port side. And we went through emergency repairs, trying to keep the ship afloat. We went through the burial at sea of those that were killed, which is an awesome thing to see.
Can you tell me what they do at a burial at sea? Tell me what type of service and what did they do with the body?
Well, I was on watch. My battle station, my watch station is the fire control tower. I was a fire controlman. Fire controlmen in the Navy are not firefighters. They control the fire of the guns. We aimed the guns. So we worked in a little doghouse up on top of the pilot house. And from there, I could look back and watch. And the boatswains went to the sail locker and made up canvas bags. And the bodies were brought up to the quarterdeck. And They put a 5-inch shell in each one of the bags and then put the body in, and then they hand sewed them closed. And they took them to the fantail. They had a big sheet of plywood there and had 4 guys that held it. And the captain read a funeral service, and they were launched into the wake one at a time. And I'll always can see those bags, because for a minute or two they would float before they start to sink in the wake. That's my bad dreams every once in a while.
About that whole thing?
Especially that funeral service, and watching those body bags as they went off of the board and into the wake, and they would float just temporarily, and then you could see them disappear. When we finished that, we was later in the day, and we were in an area that is nicknamed Torpedo Junction. It was an area where the Japanese submarines were heavy working, because it was one of our regular paths. And one of their submarines got through the screen we had and torpedoed the Juno. And the torpedo evidently hit a magazine, because the ship was not hit and sank. When it was hit, it blew up. It totally disappeared. When the smoke cleared from that, there was no trace of the ship. And one of the destroyers, the U.S.S, started to turn around, but was ordered back in line to protect the 2 remaining cruisers, and that's what we brought them on back to Espiritu Santos. And there we went alongside a tender, and they removed the ammo from our after magazines. It had been heated by fire, and then we flooded the magazines, and so it had been damaged that way, and it was taken off and taken over to the beach. And they made some other emergency repairs and gave us just 2 or 3 more recruit type sailors to help us bring her home. And so we headed back with the San Francisco, and we made it to Pearl. We didn't know at that time where the ship would be repaired. There was a possibility it would be done in Pearl Harbor. Mm-hmm. But I can still remember Admiral Nimitz when he came aboard and looked at the ship and talked to our captain afterwards. And I can clearly remember his words today. He said, "Captain, I'm sorry, I can't do anything here for you except give you fuel. Enjoy your stay in the States." It was really something. And I had a thing happen that night, which I haven't told a whole lot of people about. My wife, yes. But I was on watch that night, and some nice soul on the beach there in Honolulu had donated a little radio, and it stood on a little stand at the foot of the gangway. And in the middle of the night, out there all by myself and scared and cold and everything, I heard Bing Crosby sing White Christmas for the first time, and I bawled like a baby. And I got to tell you, today I still, a tear comes once in a while when I hear that song, Bing Crosby. But we brought the ship back to San Francisco, and the San Francisco, they took her over to the foot of Market Street and made a big to-do about it. And President Roosevelt had found something good to write about the war for the first time, because this is the first time that the Japanese forces were stopped in their offense in the Pacific. And we went on up the river to Mare Island, to the Navy Yard, and they immediately started making repairs and getting us ready to go again.
Yeah.
And
Is that the ship right there?
that is the ship.
Is that a battleship?
No, that's a destroyer. That's a destroyer. She was a Benham-class destroyer. She was built in 1939. She weighed 1,500 tons. She was 330 feet long and 30 feet wide in the beam. And our crew at that time was around 190 people. That class, there were 12 ships built in that class. The first one was the Benham, the 397, and the last one was the Wilson, the 408. And they were some of the fastest destroyers the Navy ever had.
Really?
Everyone in that class did over 40 knots on our trials. So that's almost 50 miles an hour in the ocean. That today, there is no comparison with what is known as a destroyer today. The newest destroyer with that name, the same name, there's been incidentally 4 destroyers named Sterett. The first one was the 27 in World War I, and the 407 in World War II, and then the DLG 31, which was in the Nam period, and she was in commission about 20 years. And the latest one was commissioned in Baltimore in 2008. She was launched and named in 2007 in Bath, Maine. But that ship weighs almost 10,000 tons. And she has a crew of about 385, 390, somewhere in there. And the interesting part is 85 of those crews are women.
Is that right?
And fortunately, I was at the christening and the launching and in Baltimore for the commissioning. The members of my old ship that were still around were all guests at those occasions. And we have now a reunion group, an association of members of all 4 ships. Only now we no longer have any member left of the first ship. But the rest of them, we have a group, and we had a reunion in San Diego last September. And the newest ship, the latest Sterett, was in port. She's home ported in San Diego now. Okay. And so we went aboard and saw her and marveled at the changes and the things that they can do that we never even dreamed of doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to kind of digress from the actual war part of your story and ask you a couple of questions about our country and freedom. I spoke at a school here yesterday. Were you there?
No.
Okay.
I was sitting and watching the rain.
We were talking about freedom and how we're born in a free country and all the things that the veterans have done for our country. But Jim, what does freedom mean to you?
Well, that's it means a lot. That's for sure. And even when I was young, it was something that was important. It's the reason I joined the Navy, as when I did, and as quick as I did. I was one of the first in my town to volunteer after Pearl Harbor, and it was evident to me that we had to do something, or we were going to come under the yoke of somebody else. We wouldn't be able to do the things we did. I wouldn't be able to chase girls like I did. Some of the things that I thought were real important in those days.
Was it the same kind of feeling then as it was on September 11th?
Yes, and that's an interesting story. On that day, my wife and I were on our way to Columbus, Ohio for a reunion of my ship.
Cool.
And we were somewhere just east of Tucumcari, and I had CB radio in my car, And I was talking to some truck drivers, and they told me what they had heard and what was going on. That was my first knowledge of 9/11. And of course, we turned on our car radio then and listened to it for the rest of the day. But it of course put a real damper on our reunion. But one of the things that was kind of important to us was the son of a radioman from my ship was an officer in the Army, the Air Corps, in Washington, D.C., and was in the Pentagon when the attack hit. And he, of course, got out, he's thankfully, but he got on his motorcycle and rode to Columbus so that he could speak to us at our reunion. And you talk about freedom. It's an awful big thing, and to really put it into words, I think it's got to be a feeling also.
How about the American flag? What does the flag mean and represent to you as a veteran?
Probably the best thing I can say about it is I live in a mobile home park, and of all the units in that park, I'm the only one that has a flagpole with the American flag flying. Wow. And it's lit at night, and it flies 24 hours a day. We have other people that display the flag on Veterans Days and special occasions. They hang a flag in front of their unit. But mine is on a 30-foot pole. It flies all the time. As a matter of fact, I just ordered a brand new one from the American Legion because mine's starting to fade a little bit.
Good for you. Yes. What do you think our country should remember about World War II, Jim?
We've got to do a better job of keeping our eyes open and paying attention to what's going on in other places in this world. The world has, in a way, it has shrunk, and it's gotten so small. We can't be isolationists. We can't be out here by ourselves. We've got to be aware of what's going on around us at all times. There are people who would take us over if they could.
I agree. Are you proud that you're a World War II veteran?
I'm very proud. And one of the things that I think about now, when I first came home from the service, my dad was in farming, and that was where I was raised, and that was what I had in mind to do. And I got into things that had to do with farming. I belonged to an American Legion post. As a matter of fact, I was commander of an American Legion post. And I was active in the 40 and 8. I did a lot of things, but I never thought too much about what I had done in the service. It was something, for some reason, none of us really talked about it. Yeah. In my high school class, it was a class of 84 students. We graduated in 1940. 37 of them are boys. And I know of 33 of them that were in the service. And every one of them came home. And we did things as members of the American Legion and VFW, so forth. As veterans, but we never really talked a whole lot about what we did. For some reason, this has changed now that I'm older, and I think now that it's more important that people know what we did, and certainly why we did it. As a matter of fact, day after tomorrow, I'm going to the town of Woodlake, which is about 35 miles east of here. They have a deal there. This will be the 6th year where they have veterans of World War II. They set them up in the memorial building, and they give you a table where you can show some pictures if you wish or what. And there's no formal presentations, but there are chairs in front of you where students can come and sit down and visit with you and just talk about what you did and when, why, and so forth. I think it's a very worthwhile program. Yeah. And there is a program similar to what you do that's in Fresno, a fellow named Paul Leffler. He's he's a sports director for KMJ Radio. And he has a program every Saturday called Hometown Heroes.
Right.
And he interviews people. And in my case, he interviewed me a couple months ago. He came to my home and taped it and eventually gave me a CD of the presentation. Those things now, like right today, they're just more important to me that we do things like this. There are people out there that never heard the word Guadalcanal.
Oh, I know.
And they have no idea of what it is to go out there and fight in the jungles and fight even aboard ship. And I think it gets to the point, maybe it's the wrong way to look at it, but maybe when you get to the point that you bury buddies, then things, they have a new importance. When you do things together, like in August of '43, we had a night battle in Vela Gulf. We destroyed all of those enemy ships, sank them, and none of our ships were hit at all. But we partied. We were so close together, and we are still close together. Those of us that still survive from that ship, we have regular get-togethers. Christmas cards and birthday cards, other things that we send full time still. My old gunnery officer who lives in Wilmington, North Carolina, he and I email back and forth all the time. We developed some ties then for a reason, and I think that people need to know about what happened, and that's why I'm here today, frankly, is because I think the stories need to be told. They need to be down somewhere. I've had people say to me, have you ever recorded your story for your kids to learn or to remember or whatever? And I hadn't until lately. Now I'm interested in making sure that that is out there.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's so important. That's why I'm doing my work.
And I appreciate that too.
And if you would have been at the school yesterday, you would have seen the reception that the young people had towards the work and the veterans that were there. So that's always encouraging. And that's my focus going ahead is education, educating our younger people and the legacy that you're leaving. And but I'll be glad to get you a copy of this on a DVD if you like.
I would like that.
Yes. That we're doing today. So.
Yes. I belong to a group, the Guadalcanal Campaign Veterans. It's the Marines, Army, and Navy that were participated starting from August 7th until I think the February of '43. And I've listened to some of those people talk about making presentations and how to start out with, they'll have students that just hardly paying any attention to them, and they keep their individual chatter going, but then they'll get into some of the stories about whatever happened, yes. And then things get quiet and people listen to them. Yeah. And I agree with you. If we don't get this word out, it's going to be lost.
Definitely. Yeah, I've lost a lot of my World War II guys already. I don't want to lose you, but I'm just saying. But I'm thankful that I recorded their stories. You know,
Well, I'm thankful that you are doing it.
I'm trying to work a deal with the World War II National Museum in New Orleans. It's the national. It used to be the D-Day Museum. Now it encompasses, I think, all of World War II. And I would like to get your story and a lot of other stories in these museums. So I'm going to be working on that. And then long after you're gone, your story's going to live. And I get chances to go to school, so I'm very proud of that.
Good.
We're going to do more and more and more. So, but Jim, we're at the end of the interview, and if you see one of my films, at the end I have the veterans salute. Can you give me a salute into the camera when I ask you from where you're seated?
I can try. It's been a long time, but yes.
We're not going to grade you on it. Just look right into the camera, sir. Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, perfect. With a smile, too? All right. Excellent.